Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm very happy that I've got this opportunity to talk about paradigm shifts in second language acquisition research. I've always been interested in second language acquisition studies, teacher development, and generally determinants of success, individual success in second language acquisition. My name is Annę Michońską-Stadnik, and I work at the Institute of English Studies at the University of Wrocław. I've been teaching different levels for 46 years, so I've got some experience, I think. My talk, my lecture is going to be about different changes which took place in research methodology and in research themes in the last 60 or even more years, 50 or 60 years. It will be interesting perhaps for everybody to observe how the paradigms shifted, how the changes actually took place, and why the changes took place. As I said, the talk is, is also focused, at least to some extent, on my own achievements, on my own research, because I've been witness to these changes, both methodological and thematic. Now, I'd like to start, and this is the topic. The topic of the lecture has already been introduced, and this is the plan of the lecture. At first, I'm going to talk about kind of introduction, to make some kind of introduction, and just to sum up the whole the lecture itself, what it is going to be about. Then I would like to focus on different terminology and tendencies in those changes in terminology. Then I'd like to look at research methods and research techniques in second language acquisition. And this is going to be an overview of both psychometric and quantitative research. Then I will move on to qualitative research and the challenges of the qualitative research. And the third option, which has become quite frequent recently, it was used in medical studies a little bit earlier, but in second language acquisition, it's a recent achievement. It's meta-analysis. Then I'll move on to thematic shift to give an overview of how the themes of research actually changed. And especially, I would like to focus especially on selected individual differences. And the recent achievement is the formulation of the Big Five theory. Then I would like to look at emotions and other contemporary topics which now are frequently employed in second language acquisition research. Finally, some conclusions, and I would also like to show some recent bibliography, that is selected bibliography, obviously not all bibliography, because that would take, I don't know how many slides. This is the kind of summary of the lecture. And now let's proceed. Introduction will start from the information about the most significant article, which was published by Pitt Corder in 1967 in International Review of Applied Linguistics. And the title of the article is The Significance of Learners' Errors. This article started the treatment of second language acquisition, and as a separate, we may say, field of study. and as a field of study which focused on second and foreign language acquisition, and not necessarily on applied linguistics. And the changes in methodology, in fact, were due to a number of changes in general education. The first change was the result of computer development of computer and of information and communication technology. And then the second shift was the result of the appearance of the theory, which is in second language acquisition described as complex dynamic system theory. And the change in another change in thematic shift, another change in themes, was due to the development of positive psychology. And the positive psychology contributed to interests in emotions and in well-being, and both teachers and learners well-being. The purpose of this lecture is not to criticize any methodology. And it's not to evaluate each of the methodologies. And it's not that qualitative methodology is better than quantitative. And the alternations in themes actually explain the reason behind them. And the aim is not to favor one method over another, but to actually show in what ways all of them may coexist to support a better, more thorough, valid, and reliable research in second language acquisition. Now, a few terms to be explained, because there has always been a controversy between what is applied linguistics and what is second language acquisition and what is foreign language acquisition. And most of the research, though, which was published in the United States and in the United Kingdom, and also in different parts of the world, interestingly focuses on second language acquisition. That's why the whole area of research is called second language acquisition studies. However, in Polish conditions, for example, or in any other countries, for example, English or any other foreign languages are taught not as second, but exactly as foreign. The conditions for both, that is for second language learning or acquisition, or foreign language learning, are different. And therefore, the research which we are trying to describe must have a very detailed explanation. Because when we talk about second language acquisition, we at the same time cannot talk about foreign language learning in the same way. Another thing that has to be taken into consideration is that applied linguistics cannot be associated with second language acquisition, because applied linguistics, in fact, concentrates on various aspects of language use. For instance, translation studies also belong to applied linguistics. They focus on language use, and the same may be said about investigations of speech disorders, first language acquisition studies as well, language teaching, teacher development studies, and consequently second language acquisition studies. So as you can see, we've got in applied linguistics, we've got such a number of different subfields or sub-areas, and second language acquisition, teacher development and teacher training are just one of them. So we cannot, that's why we cannot actually associate second language acquisition or foreign language learning with applied linguistics, because applied linguistics is something more. A lot of people, I think, a lot, and even specialists, wrongly assume that second language acquisition is equal to applied linguistics. There are, according to Annę Michońską-Stadnik article, there are two different traditions in second language acquisition. The first one is maybe described as psycholinguistic, and the other one as cultural tradition. Psycholinguistic tradition is more concerned with the cognitive aspects of language learning, or acquisition, or attainment. I think this is the best term because it is kind of neutral. And so the cognitive aspects, the cognitive areas of second language acquisition. The latter traditions, the sociocultural, assumes that these processes do not take place in a vacuum, and it investigates various aspects of the learning environment which may influence language attainment, including the classroom, the teacher, the peer group, and generally the situation, the educational situation in a specific country. Within these broad areas which we have just mentioned, both linguistic and psychological, and applied linguistics, we distinguish two dominant methodologies, that is quantitative and qualitative. And now a few words about the history and about why it actually happened that the first methodology, that is the quantitative methodology, dominated at some point in history. And then what happened and how it changed, that we may assume that nowadays the dominant methodology is qualitative or mixed, and explain the reasons. We'll try to explain the reasons behind it, why it actually took place. A few words about quantitative methodology. The characteristic of the most important characteristic feature of quantitative methodology is supposed to be its objectivity. And it is described by various researchers, including Diane Larsen Freeman. It can be described as reliable, as objective, logical, and generalized. And the studies which are quantitative are supposed to offer replicable data and confirm or disconfirm the earlier established hypothesis. And on the other hand, they make use of obtrusive and controlled measurement, which means that there is intervention on the part of the researcher. It's not these events do not occur naturally, so they are controlled by the researcher, and it's difficult to say, but in fact, it is a little bit like creating certain artificial conditions. Again, it's not my purpose to criticize the quantitative research, obviously, because I've been using quantitative research a lot in my different studies, and I appreciate the results, and I appreciate the whole research methodology. The history of psychometric research goes back to intelligence measurements. At the beginning of the 20th century, it was exactly in 1904 when Alfred Binet constructed the first intelligence test used for measurement of intelligence of children who were supposed to go to certain schools and to what extent these children were suitable for mainstream education, and whether perhaps they were not intelligent enough to go, they had to go to so-called special schools. And so this kind of research is called the psychometric research, as I already mentioned. And obviously that was the first step towards measuring intelligence. Then the next different tests were constructed. But each of them was actually based on on testing, not on any other kind of any other kinds of measurement. Quantitative methodology makes use of various data collection techniques, and this is pre-experiment, quasi-experiment, and true experiment. I don't really want to describe in a very detailed way each of them. Pre-experiment does not require the controlling experimental group. It is based on the pretest post-test design. That is, the pretest is given to one group, then there is some kind of treatment, and then the post-test is done, and the change in the progress of language progress is made, is established. In quasi-experiment, there is no random group design, and there is a control and experimental group. In true experiment, there is both the random group assignment and control and experimental group. The second type, this is true experiment, usually requires a fairly big number of participants, and definitely over 30, best if a group was over 100, it included 100 members. The quantitative methodology was frequently employed to check students' progress in specific language subsystems, for example, grammar and vocabulary, because simply these are the easiest to check. However, at the same time, other variables influencing progress in language attainment began to be noticed as potentially measurable. For example, motivation, attitude, aptitude, personality, cognitive style, and learning strategies. For example, in this way, research on individual differences gained more and more popularity. It was assumed that, well, everything can be measured in points and in percentages and in more advanced statistics. The most deeply criticized element of the quantitative research is the fact that it kind of automatically assumes a cause-effect relationship. It means, well, that when, for example, as a teacher or a researcher decides to make use of certain learning strategies and introduces those learning strategies this year, I did it myself, that's why I'm talking about learning strategies. So the language learning strategies are being introduced. Learners are instructed in the use of learning strategies, and then, for example, memory strategies and the vocabulary progress is measured. And it is automatic, because if there is a statistical significance, usually the correlation is then applied. The correlation measurement is then applied. So it is assumed automatically that the use of memory strategies is able to improve the students' vocabulary knowledge. Well, it's not as simple as that. If, for example, another group were measured, there could have been no progress at all. Because all kinds of individual differences, including language learning strategies, are subject to changes according to individuals, together with time, and among individuals and with time, basically. So you cannot just assume that very simple cause-effect relationship take place, especially in the area of individual differences. It is in fact too simplistic. There are requirements. So researchers who decide to make use of quantitative research must be familiar with its rigorous requirements. In other words, you have to remember about the following things. There have to be, first of all, there have to be thoroughly formulated research questions and research hypotheses. And they constitute the point of departure for any kind of quantitative study. And hypotheses postulate some relationship between existing variables. Then we've got data gathering instruments. And so we've got any kind of data gathering instruments, if not standardized earlier by other researchers. For example, there are different kinds of tests which were already done by many people many times, and they appear to be reliable. So if somebody prepares an instrument and it is not standardized earlier by other researchers, it must be piloted first. And in order to confirm the reliability and validity of the instrument. So that was number two. The third, because of the statistical data analysis is established a priori, that is by postulating a specific types of hypotheses, the research group, the research cohort must be big enough. As I said already, it could be, well, at least 30 people. The best is if there is over 100. 30 people is just, a big classroom, in fact. And, however, the better measurement is taken when the group is definitely bigger. What is the best research is results are obtained when we've got random group assignment. That is when we do not actually take into start the research on groups which we already know. Because when there is a group which we already know, it's so-called convenience sample. Groups which are available to us. And this is not random. We may somehow know instinctively that certain behaviors and certain progress can be achieved by this group when we employ a specific treatment. Random group assignment may give a set of completely different results. So that's why the statistical significance we so frequently employ, we so frequently use, even though it may be quite impressive sometimes, if the same research is carried out in different conditions, it may give a completely different results. So that's why the criticism of the quantitative research is because I'm not saying this frequently, but it occurred sometimes that all the samples practically in one specific type of research, for instance, are just convenient sample, nothing else. I know, and we all researchers know that it's extremely difficult to organize a random sampling. There's random group assignment, and it takes a lot of time because you need to have permissions. You need to go to different institutions and to ask people to help you with this kind of research. If you have your own classroom, it's okay, it's fine, and you can do whatever you like with your own group, and that's why the results may be quite predictable. And I did this research, and I'm pretty sure that if the same treatment was given to a different group, it could give different results. So the qualitative research was appeared actually. It appeared well quite early in the history of research in general. We might say that the beginnings of qualitative studies can be traced back to the Renaissance, when they mainly took the form of biographical analysis and which revealed essential information about the motivations of people's behavior and certain attitudes. Qualitative studies are often called anthropological, ethnographic, or ecological because they focus on the situational context of the observed phenomena from different perspectives, but usually from, for example, from individual and social perspective. Recently, which is wrong, I think, recently qualitative research has often been placed in contrast to the quantitative research. Well, even though in reality they supplement each other. So it's not that they are, of course, they use different data gathering technique. They've got different focus, but they complement each other. They shouldn't be like that one is better than the other, because they've got different purposes. So let me just quote from one of the researchers there who was trying to explain why a paradigm shift occurs. And so a paradigm shift occurs when it appears that existing theories are unable to explain some phenomena, or when the existing explanation is not satisfactory in new situations and contexts. So later, a new theory and new models are formulated which offer more plausible explanations and are accepted by scientists. So this is Kuhn, 1962. And in second language acquisition, this idea, the idea of unpredictability and non-linearity, was first introduced in 1997 by Diane Larson Freeman in her complex dynamic systems theory. The theory is not new, and as it comes from the sciences, from mathematics and physics. Let's take chaos theory as an example. And so that is the idea of the chaos theory was transferred in some way to second language acquisition studies. And what is especially fascinating here for second language acquisition is that Larson Freeman drew similarities between complex systems in physics, for example, weather changes, and environmental changes because of the weather, famous butterfly effect, if anyone remembers, and the second language acquisition, because it is, as you can see, it's second language acquisition or second language attainment or learning is definitely non-linear. Because we've got the idea of backsliding, the idea of so-called plateau, where, for example, learners reach a certain level and they never make any progress for unknown reasons. They kind of feel that it is enough what they have learned, and so this is. The language learning is also sensitive to initial conditions. There are two people, for example, sitting in the same classroom, the same age, the same background, and their language progress is different. And because the initial conditions, for some reasons, were different for everybody individually. So it is, in other words, second language acquisition seems to be chaotic and depends on individual differences. Obviously, it is unstable. It uses the interlanguage, which is a mixture of the native language, a mixture of the language, and a mixture of the foreign language, and the borrowings are also quite common phenomena. So the analysis, to put the long story short, the analysis of language learning as a complex process requires a different approach and different research methodology. It is not enough to look for systematic cause-effect relationships because between selected variables, because they may exist at a specific point in time, but not permanently. In the same way, one cannot expect that a certain pedagogical intervention will always result in the desired learning outcomes. In order to support the established research findings in the learning process, what is required is the systematic, continuous observation, preferably recordings, supplemented with interviews in order to capture, as far as possible, the way individual students experience their classroom activities. So generally, traditional quantitative and research methodology was replaced by triangulation and mixed research types. Triangulation, which is mentioned here, is the way of checking or observing the same kind of issue in three different ways. We may observe it quantitatively, that is measuring, observing the classroom behavior, for example, with observation charts, and then giving a questionnaire or interviewing some students, which is the third element of this triangulation process. So apart from statistical measurements, we've got interviews and we've got observations. So this is three things. That's why triangulation. Three elements, which are used in research in order to give a full picture of at least a fuller picture of students' behavior. In the qualitative research, we've got, according to Durnay and Ryan, we've got a number of data collecting techniques. There is a micro development, there is ideodynamic approach, there is formative experiment and design-based research. I just say a few words about the first two because they've been the most popular. They have become quite popular. So in micro development, research investigates the changes in the learning process, including second language acquisition, which take place during very short time spans. These spans are defined by researchers themselves and may range from minutes even to months. So a certain time span, and there is changes in the process are observed. The other one, that is the ideodynamic approach, the ideodynamic method, is quite complex. It is because, well, first of all, the learners, it requires first to video record a fragment of authentic language communication between learners. Then the same fragment is played back to the participants, and special software, computer software, is used to mark specific changes in the participants' attitudes, focusing on the specific variable which is investigated by the researchers. So the software produces a diagram of changes. It's very complex, in fact, within an established time period, measured at regular time intervals, usually in seconds. So it gives a kind of graphic representation as well. The variables in question may be willingness to communicate, for example, during a specific period of time, learning anxiety, enjoyment, boredom, the use of learning strategies. So this is the example of various methods, research methods, techniques which are used in qualitative research. Now, there are what is required for in the quantitative research. When I talked about quantitative research, I mentioned the most important features of this research. That for to secure its reliability, the same must be done in the case of qualitative research. So what is required for reliability? First of all, the observation must be systematic. Otherwise, if there is no systematic observation at every specific period of time, if there is no systematic observation, definitely the observation is not valid and not reliable. There has to be a permanent research group. So the same time, the same group with every level on every step of observation. It's the most annoying when the researcher comes to do the observation in the same group, and suddenly we've got fewer students. And this is really so there has to be a permanent group and not changing every time the observation appears or the observation occurs. Then we've got careful choice of participants, which means that the researcher must choose the participant group which would allow for a kind of reliable and serious treatment. So they would not, for example, in the interview, they would not ask additional silly questions or comments, or their comments should be really serious and reliable. And obviously, there should be many different research contexts, research situations. For example, as I mentioned, this triangulation thing, where the participants of the research should be engaged in interviews, diary writing, and also some tests and observations. One of the examples of the research tendencies which appeared at the end of the 20th century was action research. I did action research myself, and it is as a teacher. Teaching in a school, the idea of action research is improvement. When the teacher feels that they need improvement in the language teaching, they try to employ some different kinds of techniques and some kinds of treatment, some interesting activities to observe to what extent the learners would be able to make better progress. And this is what action research is done by teachers for teachers. And it is the research which is very much based on the real classroom life, and that's why it is extremely valuable. It may employ qualitative, quantitative, whatever mixed type of research as well. And finally, in this part, meta-analysis. It is perhaps supposed to achieve a more trustworthy representation that is using meta-analysis may require, the purpose of it may be to achieve a better representation of the research results, simply. Because in meta-analysis, the various kinds of statistical and computerized tools are employed in order to to sum up the results of the research and to quantify which results dominate in a specific field of study. For example, One of the latest papers in that issue, in meta-analysis, concerned the analysis of 93 articles devoted to individual differences, published in the leading journals devoted to the second language acquisition studies in 4 years' time, that is 2016 to 2020. And individual differences. And it appeared that various researchers using both qualitative, mixed and quantitative methodology focused most frequently on motivation and cognitive processes such as awareness and attention. So these phenomena, these constructs, that is the motivation, awareness and attention, in those 93 articles constituted the most essential focus. And those researchers used all kinds of methodology, that's qualitative and quantitative and mixed. And so meta-analysis sums up other people's research to show the dominating tendencies in the results, and to show which results, when compared, which results actually dominate in any kind of analysis, practically in all kinds of analysis. Now, let's move on to thematic shifts. I'd like to concentrate, concentrate on research on learning strategies, motivation, and anxiety. And there are some authors and some sources mentioned. And there, at the end of this presentation, there is a short selected bibliography. In second language acquisition research, actually the theme topic which appeared at the very beginning of research was comparing methods. Comparing methods, whether one is more effective than the other. And one of the most famous research in this field was in the 1960s and 1970s, concentrated on the effectiveness of teaching procedures. And often quoted methodological study was comparing audiolingual and cognitive code learning theory, and to what extent they were more effective. And as usual, this kind of research did not in fact show any significant differences between the two dominant methods as regards their effectiveness. The use of the former resulted in better pronunciation and speaking skills, and the use of the latter in faster progress in understanding grammatical relationships and reading and writing. And learnings, they were selected. I'd like to focus, as I said, on selected individual differences. And learning strategies was a lot of research on learning strategies in the 1980s and the 1990s. And the strategies were considered at first as stable phenomena, and they were employed by the students in order to improve their communication and improve the results in language learning and language acquisition, including vocabulary, pronunciation, grammar, and so on. Recently, however, the research continues on learning strategies, definitely continues, but finally the dynamic status was noticed. Because the use of learning strategies depends on the environment, on gender, and on the teacher, and on the age of the learners. And motivation is one of the most frequently researched area again. Nowadays, we've got we used to have 3 periods in the research on motivation. The first is the social psychological period, which was started by Gardner and Lambert in 1972 in the famous research in Canada. And the social psychological period, well, we can say discovered or perhaps formulated the idea of instrumental and integrated motivation. Then we've got the later period, which is the cognitive situated period. We've got Williams and Burden, 1997, so that's the 90s, a little bit later. And here we've got Deci and Ryan with the intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. And there is Williams and Burden were the first to notice that motivated learners expend effort. So effort is extremely important. Making an effort is extremely important, and continuing this effort, sustaining effort, becomes important in motivation, to motivate the learners. Then we've got the process-oriented period, which lasts until now. It appears that motivation is a process as well. It changes over time, and it's unstable. And Al-Khoury, for example, in 2016, wrote 2 articles, in fact, on subconscious motivation or implicit motivation, which may be influenced by the learner's attitude to the target language community and even to individual members of this community. And this is kind of implicit subconscious motivation, which has become the focus of attention of the researchers nowadays. In the anxiety, research on anxiety, we've got again, there are certain stages. We've got the confounded approach where anxiety was not really defined properly. Then there appeared, thanks to Elaine Horwitz, we've got specialized approach where anxiety was described as the test anxiety, for example, or communication anxiety. And Horwitz and her associates formulated foreign language classroom anxiety. So they built the structured foreign language classroom anxiety scale, which is used until this time. And then, as usual, with complex dynamic system theory, we suddenly discovered that everything is dynamic in the second language acquisition or second language learning. And of course, anxiety is also dynamic. We've got Gregerson's and others articles in 2014. Now, the thematic shift is in second language acquisition continues in personality research, because individual differences, especially personality, were one of the most important aspects of research on individual differences. I mean, personality of the learners. There were discussions about who are better learners, introverts or extroverts. Obviously, the approach to learning is different. We cannot say who is better. And so finally, in the 1980s, the Big Five model was proposed by Costa and McRae. And the components of the Big Five model, Big Five means big 5 elements or features of personality. And we've got openness to experience, conscientiousness, extroversion, introversion as one of those, the Big Five. And the agreeableness and neuroticism contrasted with emotional stability. And Costa and McRae prepared the NEO-PI test, which obviously tests the learners, those Big Five, that is openness to experience, conscientiousness, extraversion and agreeableness and neuroticism, the level of neuroticism. And again, obviously, you cannot just rely only in this kind of personality research. You cannot just rely only on, the quantitative analysis. Observation is needed, interviews are needed. So this triangulation method is definitely the most important and most frequently employed nowadays in second language acquisition research. More emotions and other topics which appeared. So as you can see, there was this change from a very significant change from observing lessons, from observing students' progress in different language skills and subsystems, how the students make progress in grammar, vocabulary, listening, speaking, reading, and writing. The change was into motivation, anxiety, learning strategies, and now emotions. The interest in emotion results from the onset of positive psychology already in this century. And positive psychology focuses on how people achieve happiness and how people achieve well-being, and in fact, what makes a good life. This is a different kind of psychology, because normally psychology would concentrate on problems, on people who have problems. Positive psychology concentrates on people who have no problems, who are positive, who are well adjusted to the society, and generally they are happy. And of course, there are elements of positive psychology, and they are characteristic features of positive psychology. And we've got positive external experiences, for example, positive emotions, and also positive characteristic features of the temperament. So positive individual characteristics. There are people who are, well, as everybody knows, there are people who are permanently unhappy, for example, and there are people who are permanently optimistic, and they always find good things in other people and different kinds of events. And there are also positive institutions, or there should be positive institutions. Schools should be one. A school should be one of them, which help people to develop a good life and promote the learners and the teachers' well-being. And so these are. So then. The emotions which were investigated with the onset of positive psychology were, for example, willingness to communicate, enjoyment, among others, engagement, grit, resilience, mindset, and boredom as a negative one. So apart from motivation, which is still being researched, as a dynamic element, as a dynamic feature, dynamic construct. We also have anxiety as a dynamic construct, and then we've got emotions, various kinds of emotions, which are also dynamic. Some other topics which have recently appeared, concern learners with migration experience. There are more and more articles, more and more publications on learners with migration experience. For example, children or learners from Ukraine coming to our country and joining our educational system, but also children coming back with the families who emigrate for a certain period of time. They started the school system there, for example, in the UK or in the US, and now they came back, and they have to readjust to the Polish system of educational adjust completely. Lots of difficulties occur, really, and it's sometimes it's really problematic to place these people, these students in the Polish educational system, which is completely different. There is a lot of research on multilingualism nowadays, as the in connection with the Common European Framework of Reference, which promotes multilingualism among learners. So everybody should know, according to the Council of Europe, every learner or every person should know at least 2 languages, native language and and foreign language, or second language, and perhaps a little bit weaker, the third one. That's why there's multilingual. It's not bilingual people nowadays. There should be multilingual people. And there is a lot of research on this multilingualism, in what way people, in how it happens that people acquire languages. And also a lot of research on computer-assisted language learning. And also because of the pandemic, and because of the education, online education, which had to replace face-to-face education during the time of pandemic of COVID-19. The methodology that is employed nowadays is, well, a qualitative methodology, basically, which means that people that researchers employ narratives, that is, ask people to tell something about a specific issue. Life stories, that is, telling, for example, why it happened that you started to learn foreign languages, or why it happened that you started to teach foreign languages, and in what way, how you actually developed as a teacher or as a foreign language learner. And interviews, asking questions and answering questions. And so let us just conclude. So as we already mentioned, any kind of shifts result from the fact that, in fact, the learning process, language learning process, is such a complex experience. It's such a complex experience that it is quite difficult to describe it as a phenomenon, a process which goes in one direction. In the qualitative, in second language acquisition research, our second language learning research, in fact, makes use of a lot of different social sciences. The fact is that in that methodology, which I've been talking about, is the methodology taken from the social sciences. It's not taken from the humanities. It's taken from psychology, it's taken from pedagogy, sociology, and so that's why we say that second language acquisition studies are, it's a multifaceted experience, but it is such a different, it employs such different subjects and fields of study which somehow support second language acquisition and second language learning studies. And these make the whole second language acquisition so much complex, because it takes from psychology, it takes from pedagogy, anthropology, it takes topics and methods as well from cultural studies, why not? And it takes methods and topics from sociology, from nowadays also from neurolinguistics. And of course, our basic field of study is linguistics, because we are interested in the language acquisition, and in the language acquisition, and obviously in language learning. So it's such an integrated and such a complex field of study. That's why it is sometimes so difficult to make attempts at explaining differential success. Second language acquisition studies are, the aim of those studies is to explain why certain learners are more successful than others, and other learners are less successful than others. So this is called differential success in second language acquisition. So the research there is concentrated on why it happens that some people are more, some people are less successful in second language acquisition. This differential success is the main aim of the second language acquisition studies, to explain it and try to find out why, and perhaps help other people to make use of certain strategies, perhaps, or certain teaching techniques in order to help the learners and in order to help themselves. That's why, because the second language acquisition studies are so complex, and they are so they offer such integrated skills. So it's a complex process. It has got this interdisciplinary character. Therefore, the mixed methods and triangulation, and not just single set of methods, are necessary in order to at least to approach the true story or the truth about success or lack of it. And this is where I would like to finish my lecture. And that's, if anyone is interested, that's my email address. And there is, I'm not sure how it's going to record actually. There are 3 slides with the selected references. And so it's 1, 2, this is the second one. No, 4 slides. 4 slides, yes, there are 4 slides with selected references. Right, okay. I'd like to thank you very much for listening, and all the best to you, and all the best successful. If there are any researchers, I wish you also success in research, and if there are learners, if there are teachers listening, all success and positive attitudes in language teaching and language learning. Thank you very much.